Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about a settlement in the long-running marathon defamation case brought by the two Georgia election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, whom Rudy Giuliani defamed back in the aftermath of the 2020 election. Point one, a settlement's been reached. Point two, we don't know the actual elements of the settlement. They came into court before Judge Lyman, who recently held Giuliani in contempt, and said a settlement has been reached. So the details maybe are to come. Point three, it's clear that a big part of the settlement before we get to the terms has to do with some kind of, agreement not to defame. Of course, Giuliani has been under court order and held in contempt for violation of that court order, not to defame them further. And that contempt proceeding, that's the second one that actually has been in D.C. This is before Judge Lyman, but the settlement purports to be of the whole action. It certainly includes no defamation. I think it likely includes some kind of hedged apology type language that maybe the parties either really forces Giuliani to suck it up and say I was wrong and I'm sorry, or perhaps is a little bit more of a middle ground so the parties can argue about it. But in the public statement accompanying the settlement, you had Moss and Freeman saying it's a major milestone in our agreement, and they seemed satisfied. Giuliani says in the statement, no one deserves to be subjected to threats, harassment, or intimidation. I and the plaintiffs have agreed not to talk about each other in any defamatory manner, and I urge others to do the same. So, right, that's a little bit hedged. It sounds as if, both of them are agreeing not to defame the other. And yes, he doesn't say I defame them and I'm sorry. He says no one deserves to be subjected to threats, harassment, or intimidation. That's the kind of thing that lawyers argue for hours and hours and hours into the wee hours, and that would be a material part of the settlement. But the rest seems somewhat favorable to Giuliani. Now, there was a trial set to begin shortly, in just a few days, in Judge Lyman's courtroom. And that was over Giuliani's claim, basically, that his condo in Palm Beach is his homestead, as Florida law would have it, primary residence where he really lives, and he should be permitted under Florida law, notwithstanding bankruptcy law, to keep it. And Moss and Freeman were fighting that, saying, among other things, give us some information about who's your doctor and some emails and things that they could use to disprove that claim. And because of his continual failures to follow court orders, Judge Lyman, who was the fact finder, supposed to be the jury here, had very much limited Giuliani's defense of the claims as a sanction for the contempt. And so it looked like the table was set for that holding to go against Giuliani. And so that's the sort of context. And if you think of it from that standpoint, I think that Moss and Freeman pretty much gave him, given where they were, a decent enough deal that reflects their frank exhaustion and wanting to get past it, and of course, and that's assuming that Giuliani will now comply. But basically, again, we don't know the exact details, but what we know is we have agreed to allow Mr. Giuliani to retain his property in exchange for compensation, but that means the rest of the property, some amount, but nowhere near $150 million, and his promise not to ever defame us, which, notice, is a little bit different from saying, an apology for having done so, a promise not to defame. He was already under that obligation, and and that doesn't really add much to the pile. Nevertheless, I think, they were exhausted by it, and B, wanted to, in this world, get some money, some compensation from him, and he was, bobbing and weaving. Maybe they were even considering what happens should he die, and how would that tangle things up even longer. So they say permit him to retain his property, and I think the inference, not certain, we just have a page that says they've settled, but I think his inference is he's going to get to keep his Palm Beach home, and maybe a few other keepsakes and tchotchkes, as the law would put it, that he really cares about, and they were willing to part with. So in that sense, could have been a lot worse if he went to trial, but these efforts might have continued, forever, to try to get him to just comply with the law. A huge irony for the former U.S. attorney of the Southern District of New York, who's been basically disgraced and is now sort of an outlaw or outcast to the law, including having been partially disbarred. So that to me, we'll know more, but that to me is the contours of the settlement. They get something, and must be pretty quickly, within 90 days or so, but a lot, but not everything. He gets to keep his home, which he was ready to go to trial to do, even though his claims were weak. And he issues, we'll see the words, or if there's even anything more from what he has said, a pretty darn equivocal, people shouldn't defame people kind of statement, rather than I'm really sorry I did a terrible thing to these plaintiffs. I think that's how this long, long, long saga that has so embarrassed Giuliani now ends. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.